I did a video back on March the 22nd entitled 5G Can Save the Airlines. And as we get deeper into this pandemic, I am more and more convinced that 5G and technology has to save the world. The deeper we get into this, and the more I see what's happening in New York City and Madrid and various parts of the world, where the economy for the world has just basically shut down. And the ramifications of what that's going to mean in the future is just mind-boggling. I think back to it as a child, as I was growing up. I was born in 1944. So in my childhood, I got the measles, I got the mumps, I got the chicken pox, I got virtually the whooping cough. At one point, I even had pneumonia. And I was a healthy kid. But there weren't vaccines back then. I think the first real vaccine that I became aware of was that of polio. Dr. Jonas Salk was the inventor of the polio vaccine. And polio had been around for a long time. But in 1952, it took, I think, about 3,000 lives. And then polio was such it left you sometimes just disabled. Now, through the polio vaccine, I think last year, there were 7 cases of polio in the world. I have a little issue with that. I used to belong to the Rotary, and the Rotary's biggest fundraising event or cause was polio, to extract polio. And I knew that every month part of my dues was going to extract polio. And at one point I confronted them and said, look, there's seven cases of polio in the world last year, and they were all in Pakistan. Why are we sending all this money on polio for 7 cases in the world when cancer kills 1,632 people per day in the United States, and we're worried about 7 cases of polio in another part of the world? I left the Rotary shortly after that. But nonetheless, I'm looking at this pandemic and saying this can never happen again. It just can't. And as I think about that, I think about there are going to have to be minds, and when I say minds, I mean minds concentrating on how are we going to make sure this never happens again. I read an article about how Google had presented something to the CDC about when someone was tested with the virus, that Google had a means by which through their phone they could track them, so that in essence the CDC would know where every person who was tested positive for the coronavirus was at any given time. And that started me to thinking, wow, that would mean that if you had a virus and it was known by Google, for example, you could go on an airline and Google would be able to say, no, you can't get on that airplane because you've got a virus. And that got to me to thinking even more about that video I did back on, I think it was March 22nd, about the 5G, and how I talked about a smart bathroom, that you had a smart toilet that tested your poop and your pee every morning, and then you had a smart toothbrush that tested your saliva, and you had a smart device that you pricked your finger and it tested your blood, and then you had a smart mirror that you stood in front of naked so they could see your body, and then a smart scale, and all these things that would in essence evaluate your well-being and your health every morning. And through 5G, you could pump it up into the cloud, and my pee could be compared to your pee and billions of other people's pee and their past health history and my past health history and my genome and their genome. And every morning I could get an approval to be social, and it would show up on my phone, and my phone would then be tracked. And if I wanted to go to the Super Bowl, I would have to buy my ticket with my phone, and it would be an electronic ticket. And when I showed up at the gate to go into the Super Bowl, my bot doc, the doctor who every morning in the cloud checked my health, would authorize that I had no communicable disease and I could go into the Super Bowl. If, on the other hand, it did say that I had a communicable disease, I couldn't go in. In fact, if the device was working properly, the health police wouldn't let me out of my house. And I know that is far-fetched and it's wild, but it's possible. I believe it's possible. And I know it would be a terrible violation of my privacy, but the violation of my privacy might save your life. It might save your children's lives. It might save your grandchildren's lives. And I just believe that if that kind of technology were available, we wouldn't be in the predicament we're in right now. And I believe we can never get in this predicament again. Our world can't take it. So I then go in my mind and say, okay, we were in from the 50s and Jonas Salk and the vaccines. We got vaccines that very few people get the chicken pox anymore. Very few people get smallpox. Very few people get polio, as I just told you. So maybe we are at the point in our world where we don't rely on vaccines anymore, where we don't say, okay, we're going to have so many cases of the flu and so many people are going to die, but we're going to keep it under control by sticking a needle in somebody's arm. And I think we're going to say, no, that's not good enough. We got to stop this thing before it ever gets started. And we got to have this smart bathroom and this dock in the cloud, and we've got to stop things like this from ever getting to where it got today. And I think our medical system is going to change dramatically. I think the whole mindset of controlling is going to go away. I think it's going to go to, we got to stop it before it ever gets started. And in this globalized world, and I don't think we're going to be able to shut that down, we're going to have to put our mindset at such that if you get something, I know about it, the world knows about it, and we stop it with you. And this never happens again. Is that possible? Yeah, I think it's possible. And more importantly, I think it's essential. So, I put in my mind and I say, okay, what is this equivalent to? Has there ever been anything like this that ever happened that had such a dramatic effect on the world? And, was it the steam engine? Was it radio? Was it TV? Was it the cell phone? Was it 4G? Was it the internet? And I think if you put all those things together and the effects it had on the world and then multiplied them times 100, I don't think you'd get there. So then, as an investor, I ask myself, if this is so big and of such magnitude, who's going to be the driving force that makes this happen? And as I look at it, I say, well, if I look at the elements are data. The elements are data, and the elements are getting that data out of my bathroom and getting it into the cloud. And then once it's into the cloud, slicing it and dicing it and comparing it, and that takes computer power. And I think, and I don't know, but I think that means quantum computers. So if I'm right, I got 5 elements there. Who controls those elements today? Who controls them? Who controls the big data? Who controls the computing power? Who controls making a smart home or a smartphone or a smart car? Who controls all that? We're right back to what I've been talking about, you reading. We're talking about the big 9. We're talking about the people who are going to take artificial intelligence and take all this data and make it available to my dock robot in the cloud who's going to clear my health every morning. And is going to say, I can come and visit you and your children and your grandchildren and not jeopardize your life. And I think that's where we're going. And I think if you want to be a part of it, now you aren't probably going to have the mind to invent it. But if you want to be a part of it and benefit from it, you need to, first of all, read this book. And there's a link in my description of where you can find it. And then buy those stocks. I got to thinking the day in the shower, I was saying to myself, if God came to me with what I think I know and said, Kerry, you can own any 2 companies in the world. And I said, wait, what do you mean own, God? Well, you will just be the only shareholder in 2 companies in the world. What would they be? And my first was Amazon. And then I puzzled about, well, do I want Apple? No. Apple owns 14% of the market of these. Samsung actually owns a bigger. Apple could be replaced. They don't get as much data. Second one is Google. If I could only own 2 companies in the world, and then if God said to me, yeah, but well, let's change the mix. You only got $50,000. I'm going to give you $50,000. Which 2 do you want to buy? Well, God, Amazon's almost $2,000 a share, and Google's $1,000. I'm not going to get a lot of shares, but I don't think it's about the number of shares. I think it's about the impact on the world, and that's what I want to be a part of. Think about it. Let me know what you think.